Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 12th annual Leaders in Philanthropy celebration and our first ever virtual induction ceremony. I'm Jay Dowd, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Citadel Foundation. On behalf of our board of directors and wonderful staff, I'm so pleased you've logged on to join us as we welcome our newest leaders in philanthropy. As much as we'd love to gather in person to celebrate you, our most loyal donors, we value your health and safety even more. We honor you today with this digital ceremony, and we look forward to the opportunity to invite you back to campus and recognize you in person at next year's event. We now begin our ceremony with our National Anthem. Thank you to the members of the Leaders in Philanthropy class of 2020 for joining us this afternoon. In addition to our new inductees watching at home, we also welcome members of the Citadel Foundation Board of Directors and the Citadel Board of Visitors who've logged on to join us, as well as the participating directors representing the Citadel Alumni Association, the Citadel Brigadier Foundation, and the Citadel Real Estate Foundation boards. We are also honored to welcome the 20th President of the Citadel, General Glenn M. Walters, Citadel class of 1979, whom you will hear from shortly. Permit me now to introduce the Chairman of the Citadel Foundation Board of Directors, Dr. Christopher C. Swain, Citadel class of 1981, who's participating today not only in his official capacity as our chairman, but also with his wife, Debbie, as members of the Citadel Founders Society and Legacy Society. Chairman Swain, I'd like to thank you not only for your generosity, but also for your leadership and service to your alma mater as you make your introductory remarks. Chairman Swain.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor for me to represent the Citadel Foundation staff and board of directors today on this great occasion as we welcome you, our leaders in philanthropy, to this celebration of your lifelong generosity to the Citadel. Much of the success that the Citadel achieves today is a result of your lifelong generosity, passion, and commitment to the college. Without you, the Citadel would not be the U.S. News and World Report Best Public College in the South for 10 consecutive years. And even though you're joining us from home, I think that honor deserves a round of applause. My clapping is probably the only applause you can hear today, but please recognize that the achievements of current and future students will forever applaud your selfless generosity. Because of you, the Citadel Foundation continues to be the primary benefactor to the college each year. And thanks to your generosity, the Citadel Foundation has grown into an organization capable of raising in excess of $40 million per year in cash, pledges, and legacy gifts to support the college. It's truly overwhelming to see what our Citadel family can accomplish when we come together in support of this institution. I hope you will take pride in knowing that your generosity is making a real difference and is having a profound impact on the lives of cadets and students every day. You, our leaders in philanthropy, provide the resources that enable the Citadel to excel in the development of principal leaders. In just a few moments, you'll see a brief video presentation that captures the grit and determination of our alma mater in the face of adversity. You will witness how the Citadel is demonstrating exceptional resilience and innovation to carry on its essential mission of educating tomorrow's leaders. And I believe that you'll be as impressed as I am to see the college's ongoing response to the coronavirus pandemic. We are so proud to induct each of you today through this virtual ceremony, and we look forward to being able to get together with you on campus in the future, in person, for a more fitting celebration of your lifelong generosity. Thank you for all you've done and will continue to do for the Citadel.
To the South Carolina Corps Cadets, I am proud of your commitment to share in the transformational experience that we know our mighty Citadel provides. Our campus has always been a vibrant place of learning and inspiration, but having you back after this long absence is heartening to every member of our campus community. The COVID virus required a strong response that disrupted every part of our society, including the Citadel experience. It is time to resume our mission and commitment to each other and those who came before us. You've chosen to come to campus or to return knowing that there will be more challenges to overcome as we embark on this powerful experience together. I can assure you the challenge will be worth it. In life, you will find that your most memorable experiences and your most powerful relationships are developed when you are overcoming challenges. The Citadel is not and will never be the type of institution that yields to fear and uncertainty. The long gray line will remain unbroken. I am truly proud of your commitment and your grit. Good luck and Godspeed.
Good afternoon. I'm Cadet Colonel Nicholas Piacentini, the Regimental Commander of the South Carolina Corps of Cadets. I'm from Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, and am a political science major with a minor in East Asian Studies. I plan to commission on 8 May into the United States Navy and earn a slot to basic underwater demolition SEAL training. I'd like to thank the Citadel Foundation for giving me the opportunity to speak today. On behalf of the South Carolina Corps of Cadets, I would like to personally thank all of you, the new leaders in philanthropy. Your generous gifts and loyalty to the Citadel continually allows cadets, like myself, to experience the Citadel's pristine education and leadership development process. Every cadet's experiences here directly relate back to the resources that your contributions provide. Thank you is not a sufficient enough phrase to express our gratitude and appreciation of your generosity. Because of you all, the tradition of the long gray line will continue well into the future. Your gifts, not only in the long term, but on a daily basis, affect and play a significant part in our lives. Every year, your gifts allow cadets to experience a different college life, a life that prioritizes and lives by the words honor, duty, and respect, a life that never lies, cheats, or steals, nor tolerates those who do, a life that distinguishes graduates when they depart Lassane Gateway after commencement. The Citadel's sturdy foundation and resilient character has never been more evident than during this year. The global pandemic has presented a unique challenge that has been masked and socially distant. Regardless of the adversity that COVID-19 presents, the Citadel's mission has not changed. The gifts from benefactors like you have allowed us to return and conduct a number of operations to safely and healthily keep us on campus. Beginning in as early as July, we were able to bring back and test the entire South Carolina Corps of Cadets. We continue to administer frequent testing to monitor the state of COVID-19 throughout the Corps. Our classroom experiences have been different, yet technology allows us to deliver a full academic curriculum both in the classroom and over the internet. Atomizers have allowed faculty and staff to disinfect areas on a frequent basis to protect every student in every environment. Masks are a frequent sight on campus that have allowed us to maintain uniform standards and normal operations on a daily basis. Every cadet, as with the faculty and staff, have been issued a number of these to continue to protect us and each other while also keeping us here. These efforts have allowed us to matriculate an entire NOG class in August. We've continued to train and develop the new cadet recruits throughout cadre period, just as we normally would. Just a few weeks ago, the senior class conducted the first ever socially distant and masked ring ceremony in the Citadel's history, in person as a class. Daily operations, formations, classes, regimental physical training, and the mess hall also continue as normal with COVID protocols in place. With these additions to campus life, we have been able to deliver the Citadel experience to the class of 2024 in full capacity. There will be no break in the long gray line because of the hard work the Citadel team has put into ensuring that we stay on campus. I frequently communicate my pride to my fellow cadets in being here on campus amidst the uncertainty that surrounds everyone experiencing the pandemic. With a group of 18 to 22-year-old college students, we are executing an operation that numerous colleges across the nation have failed to do. This is a testament to the kind of leader that the Citadel produces. I firmly believe that there are few other institutions in this great nation that could replicate what we are doing here. This has been a tremendous team effort, but as a group, we are conquering the adversity that has defeated so many others. This team effort would be impossible without your generosity and gifts that ensure the Citadel continues its mission to educate and develop cadets to be principal leaders in all walks of life. Your contributions have allowed the Citadel to stand forever, yielding never to any adversity we face. Regardless of the trials and tribulations we face, we proceed with courage, fully knowing we are prepared to tackle any obstacle in our way. Because of your donations, we as cadets are better educated and prepared to overcome any hardships that stand in our way. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving so generously to the Citadel. Because of you, I'm a Citadel man who knows to never lie, cheat, or steal. That duty is the sublimest word in the English language. To always shoulder more of my share of the task, whatever it may be. To follow the path our fathers showed us. To fight for peace and honor, God and country. I know that I am not alone in this company of great Citadel men and women who live by these same standards. I know that this would not be true without your gifts and unwavering loyalty to our mighty Citadel. Many cadets, including myself, can say that our abilities to be principled leaders in all walks of life is a direct result of your donations and generosity, which allows us to continue our education here. God bless you all, God bless the Citadel, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for your remarks, and thanks for your exceptional leadership during this incredible year of change. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. I'm honored to introduce our class of 2020 Leaders in Philanthropy, whose names will appear on screen. We're also delighted to feature several of our new inductees who will share their reflections on their lifetime philanthropic support of their alma mater.
It is a privilege for me to speak to each of you and be part of this celebration with our extended Citadel family out there. Professionally, I've been grateful over the years, looking back to the strong emphasis at the Citadel to develop character and exhibit strong moral principles and values. And I learned also not to quit, not to be a person who ever gives up. That was important. The thing is, too, I saw in my friends and classmates a strength and determination to rise above life's most challenging circumstances. What a great example and encouragement that has been to me over the years. Definitely instrumental in any success I've seen in business. I think it's fair to say that all of us have experienced the benefits of good, strong moral leadership, as well as the detriments of poor, weak, unethical leadership in our country, and as well as around the world. This is really the primary reason that my wife Mary and I are excited about continuing to support the Citadel. Your emphasis on developing principled leaders in all walks of life is making a difference. And I don't think there's another institution in the country that does it as well.
2020 Founders Society inductees: Mr. and Mrs. David C. Swain Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Claudius E. Watts IV. 2020 Society of 1842 inductees: Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. William M. Altman III, Mr. Terrence W. Babylon, Commander and Mrs. David J. Coyson, Mr. and Mrs. Robert A. Early, Colonel Allison Dean Love and Mr. Philip E. Love Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Robert T. Mock, Dr. Wade H. Sherrard III.
The Citadel has a very defined system. It's almost tangible. It's so well defined. And so what you have to figure out as a cadet is how can you adapt, thrive, and succeed in a system that is like the Citadel's. But what that gives you is it gives you a head start when you graduate, because then you quickly realize that whether you go into the service or you go into public work, every organization has its own system, and you've got to figure out how to thrive, adapt, and survive. So it's a great head start that you get at the Citadel. The first thing Alan and I talked about when we were talking about giving back initially was, why don't we give back my scholarship in current dollars? And then I took the job at the Brigadier Foundation, and I realized through the Memorial Fund dinner how impactful athletic scholarships are to not only cadet athletes primarily, but also for the coaching staff.
Through the Brigadier Foundation, hearing the stories, and these kids, most of them aren't going to become professional athletes, but having the scholarship here and being involved with the Citadel has made their life so much better, and they're able to pursue and be so much far advanced than what they'd ever have the chance to if they weren't here. And they couldn't be here without those scholarships. So it's so important. Our
goal again in establishing this scholarship is basically to pay it forward. I mean, that's what you're doing, and it's a way to do it on a long-term basis. Yes, we could have paid back my scholarship in current dollars, but but starting an athletic scholarship is something that will go on in perpetuity forever and ever, and we'll continue to add to the scholarship. So it just makes a huge impression to be able to make this kind of a decision on a long-term basis and have an impact on these young cadet scholarship athletes' lives.
It's just nice knowing that it'll keep going, and that you're going to help a new person if it's a 4-year scholarship every 4 years, or if they divide it up, that you're making an impact on someone's life immediately. I mean, it really makes a difference to them.
2020 Mark Clark Society inductees: Mr. and Mrs. Darren S. Bradley, Mr. and Mrs. Robert G. Hoke, Captain Ronald C. Plunkett and Dr. Linda M. Plunkett, Colonel Ned M. Sanders. 2020 Star of the West Society inductees: Mr. and Mrs. Stephen K. Agee, Mr. and Mrs. T. Furman Brody II, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert E. Chandler Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Stephen P. Columbia, Dr. and Mrs. Louis E. Costa II, Mr. and Mrs. William S. Crane, Colonel and Mrs. John C. Dominic Jr., Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Gregory W. Dyson, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Edward L. Zanis, Colonel and Mrs. Leonard C. Fulgham Jr., Mrs. Patricia Ann Griffin, Mr. Harry Hughey, deceased, and Mrs. Reba Hughey, Colonel and Mrs. William E. Jenkinson III, Dr. and Mrs. Dallas W. Lovelace III, Mr. and Mrs. John L. Raspberry, Dr. Frederick W. Schuler, and Dr. Magdalena Schuler, Lieutenant General and Mrs. W. Michael Steele. 2020 Summerall Society inductees: an anonymous donor, Mr. and Mrs. David L. Anderson III, Mr. E. Todd Barker, Mr. and Mrs. W. Randall Bassett Jr., Colonel and Mrs. Charles E. Beam, Mr. and Mrs. John P. Carlisle III, Colonel John H. Colley Jr., Mrs. Michelle V. Costello, Mr. Daniel B. Crosby, Dr. and Mrs. Gary G. Durante, Mr. and Mrs. Ralph B. Eccles Jr., Dr. and Mrs. John E. Felch Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Alexander J. P. N. Fornell, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Robert A. Fullerton, Colonel and Mrs. Ephraim E. Grubbs III, Mr. S. Mark Hood, Mr. and Mrs. John C. Jameson, Mr. and Mrs. James H. Johnson, Mr. William R. Johnson, Colonel Mark E. Kippett and Lieutenant Colonel Lorna J. Kippett, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Peter A. Leventis, Mr. and Mrs. Charles A. McQueenie, Mr. Crawford W. Melton and Ms. Lauren A. Fleming Melton, Mr. and Mrs. Michael D. Mensinger, Mr. and Mrs. J. Bryce O'Brien, Mr. and Mrs. Robert C. Patty, Colonel Alvin A. Perkins, Mr. Adam F. Sir, Mr. and Mrs. Hayward B. Sutherland, Mr. Walter L. Tatum, Colonel and Mrs. Charlie A. Templeton, Colonel and Mrs. Michael L. Walters, Mr. and Mrs. David R. Webster, Mr. G. Ken Williams.
So much of the Citadel experience from beginning to end molded me into who I am today. And I'm so thankful for that.
Walking down the Avenue of Remembrance as a knob and being dog-tired and, not sure what's coming next when you get back to the battalion, but having to look people in the eye and salute them and being attentive and understanding your surroundings and knowing where you are is important in my job because I'm in the OR every day and I work with surgeons who demand my full attention and my understanding of what's going on and why they're about to do the next thing they're going to do while they're operating. So the constant readiness that the Citadel, ingrained in us is something that I think really helped me in my career.
When I think about how busy our lives seem right now with 3 young children, I know that that's only going to become busier. And with that being said, I just felt like we needed to go ahead and get started. We know how important the Citadel is. We want to preserve that experience for the generations to come, and we really felt like we needed to go ahead and get started.
There's no time like the present, so that's why we started doing it now.
Donating in the form of a scholarship was really going to be the way that we wanted to do it because we wanted to pay it forward. Mm-hmm. I was, graciously given athletic and academic scholarships to attend the Citadel, and we just really felt like it was the right thing to do to be able to provide that same wonderful Citadel experience that we've both so greatly cherished to others in the future.
2020 Legacy Society inductees. An anonymous donor, Mr. and Mrs. Stephen K. Agee, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. William M. Altman III, Colonel and Mrs. Jairus C. Anderson, Mr. and Mrs. William T. Benton Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Stephen C. Blose, Mr. and Mrs. Darren S. Bradley, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert E. Chandler Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Stephen P. Clinton, Mr. and Mrs. Stephen J. DeTullio, Mr. and Mrs. Robert A. Early, Mr. and Mrs. Jacob J. Fountain, Mr. and Mrs. Alexander J.P.N. Fornell, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Robert A. Fullerton, Mr. R. Justin Graves, Colonel and Mrs. Ephraim E. Grubbs III, Colonel and Mrs. William E. Jenkinson III, Mr. and Mrs. David S. Jones, Mr. and Mrs. R. Tanner Jordan, Colonel Mark E. Kippett and Lieutenant Colonel Lorna J. Kippett, Mr. Stephen E. Love, Major Michael D. McDowell, Mr. Crawford W. Melton and Ms. Lauren A. Fleming Melton, Mr. and Mrs. Robert T. Mock, Mr. and Mrs. James F. Mosley, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur J. O'Donnell, Captain Ronald C. Plunkett and Dr. Linda M. Plunkett, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. Romero H. Reed, Colonel Ned M. Sanders, Mr. and Mrs. Robert W. Scruggs, Mr. and Mrs. Douglas Smith, Lieutenant Colonel and Mrs. John E. Stenger Jr., Mr. Adam F. Sir, Mr. and Mrs. James E. Thigpen, Mr. G. Ken Williams, Mr. and Mrs. Zachary J. Europe.
4 years at the Citadel and then 4 years in the Air Force. I was in uniform for 8 years. That second 8 years, I was comfortable in the uniform and comfortable in a structured environment.
The Citadel is such an important part of who Ken is, and I, having met him just a couple of months before he graduated, we didn't have that time together at the Citadel. But since then, and with all the contacts that we made over the years, I really do have a love and a admiration for the Citadel.
We recognized the value of the kinds of people that had come out of the Citadel and continued to come out of the Citadel. And what we looked at was that we participate in that being sustainable financially. We recognized that the state of South Carolina was reducing the amount of money that was being provided to all the colleges and universities, and that the smaller ones, particularly like the Citadel, has bigger impact. So the individual donors have to be, I think, more generous and consistent to help that.
The academic rigors and the principled leadership are so important to us, and we see it in them and are just, it's very gratifying to see how the Citadel, the product the Citadel is turning out. So we're very honored to support that.
It is a real honor that, number one, that the Citadel would identify and recognize people regardless of the amount. Just the fact that they've been engaged consistently financially for 25 years. The Citadel family is a huge family and it has different segments. This is one segment that represents 25 years of loyalty from a lot of different people and different kinds of people. And I thank you for giving us the opportunity to address that and to talk about it. It's a real honor.
It's just very special to us, and it's always been a part of the kind of organization we want to support.
2020 Order of the Tartan inductees. Captain and Mrs. Tony L. Albano. Mr. and Mrs. J. Benjamin Black II. Mr. and Mrs. Edward N. Blackmer. Colonel and Mrs. Gerald E. Bozeman. Colonel Thomas H. Brett. Colonel and Mrs. Waldo W. Brooks III. Mrs. Jean Calvert. Mr. and Mrs. Kevin Campbell. Mr. and Mrs. Matthew L. Crabb. Mr. and Mrs. Kenneth P. Daniels Jr. Mr. and Mrs. Jerry F. Friedner. Dr. and Mrs. Greg S. Govett. Mr. and Mrs. Michael L. Hammett. Mr. and Mrs. Stephen W. Holderness Jr. Mr. and Mrs. Mark O. Hopkins Jr. Mr. Andrew L. Hutchinson Jr. The Honorable and Mrs. Howard P. King. Mr. and Mrs. Frederick R. Clare. Mr. and Mrs. James E. Krause. Brigadier General James E. Mace Sr. and Dr. Francis A. Mace. Mr. and Mrs. Roy J. Morgan. Mr. and Mrs. William C. Park Jr. Dr. and Mrs. John D. Pro. Mr. Richard E. Sachs. Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Steinberg. Mr. and Mrs. Clayton E. Swinson Jr. Mr. and Mrs. James M. Uschelbeck. Colonel and Mrs. Wilbur T. Workman. Ms. Anita Zucker.
Congratulations to all our new inductees. Please take a moment to give yourselves a big round of virtual applause. We're grateful for your lifelong generosity. I hope you will each reflect on the magnitude of your gifts to the men and women in the South Carolina Corps Cadets and the Citadel Graduate College. On behalf of the Citadel Foundation Board of Directors and our staff, we thank you for all that you do and for joining us this afternoon from your home or your office. It is now my pleasure to introduce the 20th president of the Citadel, General Glenn M. Walters, Citadel class of 1979. An accomplished aviator, a 39-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and a dedicated alumnus to his alma mater. General Walters joined the Citadel as its 20th president in 2018 and brought with him an extensive dossier of leadership and public service. General Walters, we're grateful for your leadership, and more importantly, for your direction in these unprecedented times. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you General Glenn M. Walters, Citadel class of 1979.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks to your whole staff for the work put into this ceremony. Unfortunately, we've all gotten too skilled at virtual engagement. I look forward to when we can all meet and celebrate together instead of over video screens. It is an honor for me to add my welcome to our new inductees. Gail and I are continually amazed by the great things so many of you do for our school. We appreciate your generous support to the college. Needless to say, these past months were unprecedented for our nation and the Citadel. The impact of this pandemic will be felt for years to come. Financially, in society, across higher education, and certainly at the Citadel. But I have no doubt we will shine and grow stronger thanks to our cadets, students, faculty, staff, and alumni supporters. You represent the epitome of principal leadership by making significant contributions, ensuring the Citadel remains an institution of leadership, excellence, and academic distinction. We cannot maintain our standards without the passionate support of generous donors with your vision and commitment. We are so fortunate our value-based education is in demand today. You all help make that possible. You heard a bit from the regimental commander about the Corps. I will echo and expand those comments I made at the class of 2021's ring ceremony. The leadership and perseverance shown by everybody on campus these past few months is incredible, particularly the cadets. You would be so proud, as I am, if you could see them each day. While we've changed many of our daily activities so common to life at the Citadel, we maintain the core of our unique lifestyle and instructional model. It's a testament to what's been built here. Thanks to folks like you, we continue to attract quality young people in the challenge of the Citadel experience and who leave better prepared for the workforce, military, and serving their communities. Those outcomes are made possible by everybody joined here today. I can't say what the next several months or years will bring, but I am confident in the Citadel. We are poised to adapt and overcome. I look forward to working with you and continue to make the Citadel a better place. Your generosity keeps the Citadel the #1 public college in the South for the 10th consecutive year, vibrant and strong. We are truly blessed by your generosity, and we look forward to recognize you in person next year. Thank you. As we close our ceremony with the Citadel alma mater, may God bless you and your families. May God bless the Citadel and the United States of America.